try is going to be slightly more successful. And we'll hit the record button and we will be ready to go. Okay. We are going to go ahead and call this meeting to order of our Realignment Committee for the period of the fall 2025 through spring 2028 school years. It is April 16th. It is 1:31 p.m. and we thank everybody for joining us today. I know some of you are still getting settled in here to the waiting room and into our Zoom room. And I am going to go ahead and start with a roll call. So please do indicate that you're here by letting me know as your name is called. Ms. Formaster.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Katz.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Baldwin.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Vick.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzsimons.
Here.
I don't even want to know. Mr. Parker.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Scott. Dr. Berkeley. Mr. Larson.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Odegaard.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Cottrell.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Pearson.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
I'm going to get in the car and kind of see if I can.
Mr. Cole.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Habig.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Marcouzis.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Polzian.
Forget about it.
Thank you. Mr. Art Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Bell.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Holbrook.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Magram.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Kofer.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Levitt.
Here.
Thank you. Bart Davis is here. Ms. Lotz. Mr. Paul Anderson. Okay, that completes our roll call. Let me get onto the share screen here so that everybody too can play along. There we go. And we will move on to item number 3, which is the approval of today's agenda for the April 16th meeting. We would be looking for a motion to approve. The agenda, by the way, is on pages 2 and 3 of your packet. Again, looking for a motion to approve today's agenda.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will motion that we approve today's agenda and make it flexible if needed.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzine, I'll second. Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead, Polzine. Sorry, sir.
Tony Polzine, I'll second.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. We have an agenda that has been approved for today. It is a flexible agenda should we need it. Moving on to agenda item 4, which is the approval of the minutes from the March 21st Realignment Committee meeting. Those are on pages 5 through 7 of your packet. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them, and we are entertaining a motion to approve those minutes.
Hey, Bart,
Sir.
something on the minutes. I believe it's on the first page where it said, just a correction in the minutes from last time. It said Ty Wakefield, coach at Boulder City High School. Needs to be corrected to Virgin Valley High School.
Virgin Valley, okay. Yeah, I do see that under public comment number 6. Okay, so we will make that change. He is indeed a coach at Virgin Valley High School. We apologize for that mistake. We would again look for an approval of these minutes with what Mr. Simons has noted.
Bart, quick question, and maybe I'm forgetting, but what last time did I present part of that plan to the committee? I didn't see that in the minutes, and so maybe it was the time before that. Is that?
I think that's, and we've got you down to present part of that for today, obviously, as well. I don't believe that did happen in the last meeting, but you may have commented on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, once again, looking for a motion to approve the minutes with the correction as noted by Mr. Fitzsimons.
Dallas
Go ahead and
Larson,
make it.
3A South. I will make the motion to approve last time's minutes with the amendment of the Ty Wakefield being from Virgin Valley.
Thank you. We have a second.
Jason Odegaard, Pahrump Valley, 3A South. I will second.
Thank you, Mr. Odegaard. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. We approved the minutes from the March 21st meeting with the correction on where Mr. Wakefield is coaching. We will get that taken care of. Moving on to agenda item number 5. As we scroll back to the agenda here, the committee chair announcements and comments. Not much here. I do envision one more meeting before we get to summer break, probably looking last week of April, first week of May. We'll send something out to everybody to try to make sure we've got a time that's convenient for everyone. We'd look for any more proposals that are going to come in, probably to come in prior to that meeting. And what that will do is give us a chance as a committee to kind of discuss what we've got to that point. I do want some time to pass so that it's not, we don't feel like this is rushed. I see us coming back together August, late August, early September, once everybody's back in school. That would probably need to be an in-person meeting, and we would have a membership hearing about the realignment policies and procedures at that point. And that would need to be prior to the board meeting of September 24th and September 25th. So kind of be prepared for that. I will be reaching out to some of our committee members, either myself or Ms. Wonder from our office will, to get some information from you for those who may need to travel. Haven't set a location for the meeting yet, so I'm not quite sure who's going to need to travel. But if it does involve air travel for some of you, we would need to get some of that pertinent information to make sure that your tickets can be purchased and all that good stuff. Other than that, again, the usual rules apply here. We are very much subject to the Nevada open meeting law for all that we do. That being said, still, I would like everybody, if you have something to say, please speak up, because being virtual, it does create a little bit of an issue from time to time. But go ahead and speak up. I'm not going to be offended if you talk over me. I'm just not going to be. Okay. Other than that, I think we're good to roll through this portion of the meeting. I don't want to keep you forever, but this could get a little bit involved. So be aware, please. All right. Item number 6, public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to a committee member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. Got one person who's not yet in the waiting room. They are going to be part of a presentation under item number 8. It's not a direct public comment, but that person is out there. I do know we have one person who has joined the meeting, Rich Morocco, the athletic director and football coach at Liberty High School, is here with us. Coach Morocco, you're able to get in the room? You're here? Please speak up if you are. Coach Morocco, I need you to unmute if you can.
Bart, he just fell out. I think he's trying to get there. He's back in now.
Coach Morocco, you're able to get in the room? You're here?
Yep.
Okay, there you are, Coach. We are just starting the public comment portion. Do you need to share your screen, Coach?
If I could, yeah, that'd be.
Need you to unmute it. Okay, there we go. I have taken the share screen out. You should have permission to share your screen. I'm going to let you go ahead and do that before you start your public comment, because just in case there are any delays. We are just starting the public comment portion. Do you need to share your screen, Coach?
Yes, please. If I could, yeah.
Yeah, somebody's got the YouTube portion of the meeting kind of on in the background. And that's what
YouTube. Let me share that screen out.
there you go. Share your screen. I'm going to let you go ahead and do that before you start your public comment, because just in case there are any delays.
Hang on a second. Yes, please. Let me close that. All right, you guys there?
Yeah, and if you would click back to the proposal then that you're wishing to share, Coach, so that you share screen for that. And that was up on our screen just a moment ago.
You got it now?
I do, yeah. And it looks like you're representing the Southern Nevada Football Coaches Association with
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yep.
Coach, you got 5 minutes then, since you're representing a group, and I'm going to let you go ahead and take the floor.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate you guys having me on. I just want everybody to know that we do not have a single proposal from the Southern Nevada Football Coaches Association at this time. We had a meeting, 2 meetings actually, last week, and we're currently working through 3 different proposals. We feel that if we could come together and be united on a proposal, it might carry a little more weight with the committee. So, but I do want to just go over what the 3 are briefly. I don't want to get into all the details with them. I did share this with a couple members. I know hopefully by the next realignment meeting that you guys have, you'll have our formal proposal. But essentially, I did poll our association, and a vast majority of the coaches, I think all but 4, want to see some sort of change to the realignment system that's currently in place. And so just real quick, here's the proposals. The first one is basically a California, Arizona model, which would be combine all the 5As into a 5A league, have an open division, play the season out. At the end of the season, take the top 8 teams in the state, play an open championship, let everybody else play the 5A championship, have a 4A, just normal 4A state championship, normal 3A state championship, 2A and 1A. Basically, if the top 8 teams are all Southern Nevada teams, then all 8 would come from the South. However, if there was a Northern team or 2 that finished in the top 8, then they would join the open playoff system. I think this is a fair way, to kind of deal with the issues of, Bishop Gorman, and if you want to throw Liberty into that mix, and in a year where maybe you have a good team and you feel you can compete in that level, then you should be in there with the top teams. And like I said, the rest of the schools would then compete for a regular 5A championship. Teams would be broken up in the South based on alignment of geography as best as possible. So just to put together an example, this wouldn't be, again, we'd have a lot of work to do before we put people in leagues and all that. But just as a brief example, based on teams that were in 5A last time, the Northwest might be Arborview, Palo Verde, Shadow Ridge, Legacy, Centennial. The Southwest, the Southern Central, we called it, and the Southeast. Along with this proposal, Coach Kofer from SLAM kind of said that maybe we should factor in some enrollment protections, so that certain 3A schools that don't have the enrollment. If they win 3A, they should be allowed to stay in 3A, or vice versa, same with 4A. So we kind of put together, we looked at the enrollment projections for next year for CCSD and kind of came up with a range. Schools with 3,000 or more students, which includes the multiplier, must play in the 5A. Schools with 2275 to 2299 might be eligible for relegation to drop down into the 4A. And we did that for each league. So 4A schools with 1301 to 2274 are 4A enrollment protected from advancement. However, the bottom two, could go down into the 3A, but they wouldn't have to move up into the 5A. Schools with 2275 to 2299 could be eligible for advancement, but they wouldn't be eligible to go down from 4A. And then 3A, 451 to 899 are 3A enrollment protected. 900 and above could go into the 4A based on their final rankings. I know this is a lot to throw at you guys in a 5-minute period. So I just want you to know that we've got ideas. We're going to work it out. And in the next meeting, you'll have our proposal. But that's one proposal, essentially. The second proposal is a public-private charter school playoffs. We're calling it the Hawaii model, which basically we would have leagues the same as the first proposal, geography-based. There's a lot of benefits to having geography-based leagues. It saves in transportation. You get better attended games. You're going to make more money. It's a better environment for football. And then once you play the regular season, you mix the publics and the privates in a regular season so everybody can get their games. But then when the playoffs come, you separate them. And again, I know that some people will say, well, we only have 3 large school classifications for private schools. And I would say, well, that's what Hawaii does, and they figure it out. The bonus to this proposal would be, you would have a public school champion, and then you'd have a private / charter school champion for each classification. And then you could always play a +1, like an open or a bowl game or whatever we want to call it, where the public and the private play. Again, it's
Coach,
what Hawaii.
unfortunately, we're at the 5 minutes, so I do have to follow the
All
protocol.
right,
But
real quick. The last proposal is to create a 6A, and basically, we're going to vote on these 3 as an association. Like I said, when we have it, then we'll submit it to you guys.
Coach, thank you for the comment. If you'd like, you can feel free to send all those proposals to me. I can forward them out to the committee, or if you would like, you can also wait till your group settles on one. That's totally up to you, but we do thank you for sharing that today.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other public comment at this point? Anybody from anywhere else in the state? And I don't believe we've received any into the office. I do not have anything more in my email. Coach, I do see what you sent in. Thank you. We will get that out to everybody. All right, we will move on. And we will move to item number 7. Timeline for the realignment. And this is for possible action today. As you will recall in the last meeting, sorry for making you dizzy, we did pass a realignment timeline. What our staff has done is kind of made it a little bit prettier than it was in the document last time around. Nothing has changed here. None of the information has changed. We were simply trying to build that document so that it would be more understandable, better readable, however you'd like to put that. Hopefully you've had a chance to, again, review that in your packet. I just want to make sure with this committee that everything you see here is good. I would ask that we do have a motion here to approve this timeline once again. Again, no changes were made since the last meeting, but I don't want anything on this timeline to be incorrect. If we're comfortable with it, we can make a motion, we can make a second, and we can move on with it. If there's something you see on here that needs to change, now is the right time to do that. So again, everyone, we will at this point entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the timeline for the 24-25 school year as it's posted.
Do we have a second?
Lou Marcuzis, second.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Timeline set. Thank you, everyone. We will again move on to item number 8. And this is where we discuss more policies and procedures. We do have for possible action on this, though, in all honesty, I don't see that we're going to take any action today. I don't anticipate that we would, but again, that's kind of up to everybody here. I'm going to take this out of share for just a moment. There is somebody else need to admit into the meeting. We do have some more proposals that have come in. One of those has been brought forward to us kind of as a combo here between Mr. Wakefield, who again is from Virgin Valley, and I know Mr. Larson is going to be a part of this too. Mr. Wakefield, I believe you have joined the meeting. Are you here, sir?
I am.
Thank you. I will get your proposal up here on screen in just a moment. This is kind of me trying to do 75 things at once. And once you get past one, it's a disaster. Mr. Larson, I know you want to join in on this as well. You and I have talked about this a little bit. Let me get to Mr. Wakefield's proposal, which should now be up on your screen. Mr. Wakefield, this is your proposal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Larson, Mr. Wakefield, however you'd like to deliver this. Again, we're part of item number 8 here for the policies and procedures. I'm going to turn it over to you guys, please.
Okay, I'm gonna let Ty present his. We've talked about this, but I told Coach Wakefield I'd like him to present it as he has been the person that's done the most work in this proposal. I just wanted to make sure if we had a chance. I didn't think this would be a vote at all. I just thought we could at least discuss it as part of this today, as it seems to be something that's come up a few times. So that's why I wanted to be a part of this, so we could just at least get a discussion going at this time, as we know it's one of the proposals. So, Coach Wakefield, I'll let you take over.
Thank you, committee members. Thank you for your time and all that you do. This is just a way for me to be able to put some placement of teams for the principle behind what I think has happened in 3A boys basketball, which is the rubric, I think, does a good job in some areas. 3A boys basketball over the past 3 years, I don't think there's been the parity or the competitive balance that we would want, that we see in other classifications. And this would be one way in which I think you could remedy that. So as you can see, this is everything in blue or in a color would be the change from what is currently. So you would see Democracy Prep, Mater East, and the Meadows up there in 4A. And the reason for that is Democracy Prep 1, from what I understand, would like to go up to 4A right now. They were the winners last year. They beat everybody by an average of 43 points per game. Mater East beat everybody by 38 points a game. The Meadows beat everybody by 21. So there is a competitive imbalance. And so in going back saying, how did we get there? That's why I think the principle is more important than this proposal. And there's a lot of changes that could be made. So I can continue to talk about this. You can ask questions about it. The other thing would be I'm just taking some of the private schools from 2A, such as Green Valley Christian, Lake Mead Christian, and I'm just spitballing saying these would be the ones that I brought up. The Amplis, Somerset Sky Point, Pinecrest Cadence, they, in looking at last year, were outmatched in 4A, so they would come down to the 3A private/charter division. You would have SECTA, who had a tough time in 4A, they would go into the public division of 3A. There was one omission up at the top with the northern school, Galena. It was a transcription error. Galena would be added to that. You can see it's right in 9 teams from the north. So Galena would be there. And there's a lot of different ways in which you could make up the 4A. But in looking at how the 4A shook out last, in terms of you look at the playoffs, there was pretty good parity. And that wasn't the case in 3A boys basketball. So the other thing is that based on these policies and procedures, I think it might be helpful in a 3-year contingency or a 3-year realignment period to have something where, say, for instance, a democracy prep wants to go up this year, but they have no way in which to do that from a procedure way. So if there's a way to be able to write in something this, I think 3A would benefit, and maybe some other areas would. If any year within a realignment period, a team wants to be promoted, if we could provide a way for that to happen, we have teams who like Democracy Prep, beat everybody by 40 points. They want to go up. It helps their kids. It would help the 3A teams to have a more competitive balance. I would love to see something like that, a provision like that in there. And then 2 and 3 are just in me thinking, all right, what if we have El Dorado, who from the rubric standpoint has a higher enrollment in the public school? Or let's say in the 3A private, you have Meadows. Meadows, you look at the rubric and they're deemed to be put into the 3A private. But then in 2025, they beat everybody in that private division by 40. And instead of saying, well, they should have been up, we got to suffer through this for 2 more years, one of these provisions or policies would allow to be able to move up. So it's similar to having the promotion relegation. I think that is important to be able to have in place, if possible, to be able to move teams that dominate, move up, and maybe teams who get dominated in 4A down.
Hey, Coach, I'll talk just a little bit here. I know when we talked that the names of the schools you put in there aren't necessarily where they would have to be on any kind of alignment. On the 4A or any of that those could be geographically based. Those could be rubric points based, correct? When we were talking about that.
Yes, there's a lot that could be polished on here. And yes, to your point, Dallas, I was just simply putting teams in categories or columns so they could be moved around in a lot of different ways.
So I think your proposal would create a 1 league the North in the 4A with 3. And once again, I know that you're saying this is a 3A proposal, but it does affect the 4A, which in turn could affect the 5A as well. But with 3 Southern leagues, if you will, and 1 Northern one, and then the South would have 1 league for the public schools and 2 Northern leagues is what you're showing there. I know that'll have implications when it comes to state representation when we get to that point. So we talked a little bit about that as well, and how we could configure a 3 league in the state. So
Can I ask a question real quick, just to clarify, make sure I'm not seeing it wrong? You're only looking at pulling private and charter in 3A, not anything else, just 3A?
Yes. So Tammy, this is, again, I'm a 3A coach. And so sorry
Gotcha.
if I'm
Okay.
blind
No, that's
to
fine.
everybody
That's
else.
fine. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. And to go back to Dallas's point from a 4A standpoint, it's really just a net loss of 1. So if those 3 teams from current 3A went up to 4A, we only pulled away SECTA, Amplis, Somerset, and Pinecrest from 4. So it's just a change of 1 team in the 4A. And when you compare this proposal to the current alignment.
Mr. Markousis, I believe you have a question. You raised your hand. sir.
Yes, sir. Hey, Coach, thanks for taking the time out putting this together. Just kind of more of a follow-up leading to kind of Tammy's comments. But have you had any further discussion with, I guess, the president of the Association for the Basketball Coaches in the South? And if so, is there a climate to proposing something like this at the 4A and 5A level as well? Because I could see this being a possible option for either one of these other levels. I just wasn't sure what the conversation went on your end.
Mr. Markousis, who I have spoken to is mostly from the 3A. So Boulder City, Fernley, Elko, Moapa Valley. Those are those that I've talked to. From the 4A, I don't know how it would look. There's not a big change in my mind. I believe from the rubric standpoint, Mater East was going there anyway. So the only difference would be from a 4A is they would be getting Democracy Prep and the Meadows. So I think some of this was already coming down the line. But to your second question, there's a lot of things that could be cleaned up on this, but I think I like the idea, and it goes back to the presupposition is, how do we return parity? I think that instead of just looking at how many students are on a campus, we need to look at how that student gets on a campus. And so just to give you an idea, we have a Walmart to shop in Mesquite, Nevada, one single Walmart. So those of you that are in the Las Vegas area, if you think about how many Walmarts, Costco's, Sam's Club that you could go and shop from, I bet you could come up with a lot. But we get all of our students from one single solitary middle school, and that's predictable. We know who's coming in. And from the private schools, I think it's different for you guys. Their kids can come from anywhere in the greater Las Vegas area, and that can have a big impact on enrollment, athletic enrichment, in how you get your kids. So taking the public schools and having them compete together, the private schools competing against each other, I think is a better way to have parity and competitive balance. Because I love that Mater East, Democracy Prep, and the Meadows, they haven't done anything wrong. They're doing great things, and I want to see them continue to play basketball and do great. We can't compete with them at 3A because we can't get students on our campus the same way in which they can.
Mr. Markousis, any follow-up to that, or?
I mean, my only follow-up is probably more for you, Bart, and maybe the committee. Are we, I know we're soliciting ideas, but are we insisting that ideas come forth from the respective presidents of each of the associations of, and let's face it, it's the big three, right? Football, basketball, baseball, typically in past years have been the drivers of this. And I know that each of those representatives from both North and the South, oftentimes, or they're at least supposed to meet and kind of come to some type of consensus or proposals. So I love what Coach did. What I would encourage Coach or recommend to the Southern Nevada basketball group is get together with their president at the 4A, 5A, or whoever collectively represents, and let's see if we can add this framework to something else and make it a really robust proposal. Because I like the thinking of this from my perspective at the moment, but I guess again, more kind of comment toward you, Bart, and the committee members. I would just encourage that we actively engage with those representatives for each of those big three in particular. I mean, of course, all, but we know how the big three come in at the 11th hour and want to change things up in past realignment meetings or forums. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Markousis. Are we insisting that they come up with? No, obviously not. We are opening it up that if they wish
Yes,
to.
sir.
That's entirely a possibility. We obviously, once we get to something, and we're going to have still got another proposal to go through. There's still one sitting out there that hasn't been sent yet that I know is coming. we're going to have quite a few to go through, and that's going to be a large portion of our next meeting as well, where we look at this. And I think that's time as well. Once we start to narrow some of these down a little bit, where we go and speak to these associations and kind of say, look, this is what we're looking at. What do you think? Type of thing. I'll
Bart?
let anybody. Yeah,
I'm sorry, Dallas Larson. I don't know where to raise my hand on this thing. Sorry.
you're good.
I just as a comment as a coach, I know the Football Coaches Association is pretty solid. There's lots of in the South. That's a Southern basketball. I don't know. As a basketball coach for 10 years, I don't know if I was ever a member in the 3A from the Basketball Coaches Association. So I don't know. I'd have to ask current basketball coaches in the 3 or wherever how much influence the Coaches Association has for in basketball as that goes. I do know that in the 3A, the athletic directors in the schools have a lot more say, both north and south, in this type of situation when it comes to more than the per se the association for that. Now, my other question, Bart, for you is, and I don't know if we need Paul here to maybe answer this, but if you're looking at this proposal, is there a lot of changes in NACs or is there a lot of things that we would have to change to even implement something like this?
Well, I can't speak for Mr. Paul Anderson. I do know where he's at right now, and I wish I were with him.
Yeah.
But it's a tough way to answer the question. But my question would be, how are we putting these teams where we're putting them in this alignment? What are we basing this 25 through 28 alignment on? Because Mr. Paul Anderson, I can darn well guarantee, would tell you right now, we need to stick as close to the NAC as we can here because of everything that got passed through the Legislative Council Bureau, got changed, all the work that they did to make our current way of aligning teams shaped into state law. I don't know, Mr. Wakefield, I know we've got Mr. Jackson's had his virtual hand raised for quite a while and his arm's probably getting tired. And I'll get to him in just a moment here, but Mr. Wakefield, that would be a question that kind of the $64,000 question, I guess. Why are these teams placed where they are? What are we basing it on, especially as we look at the 4A teams and those 3A public school teams?
Yes, and if you, I only put the 4A in there for the sake of being able to answer the question, what is best for 3A? So my apologies that I haven't given this a holistic approach with everything, but I think the first step would be able to say, yes, this might work. If it doesn't, there's no need to go on and figure out how, if it's not possibility within the ramifications of the law, then there's no need to go and see how it, there's no way to proceed forward. But if it is able to happen, I would just say that it would probably run into the same thing as what Mr. Morocco put in there. If you're going to have a playoff picture, there would be some type of way to be able to say, all right, teams are going to be put in 3A based on their public versus private or charter designation. And then you'd have to figure out if that's possible to then go and say, okay, the state championship would look this way for 3A private versus 3A public. The other thing, before I would love to go to the Coaches Association and I can do that legwork. There's a lot that can be said. This is not a perfect proposal, but I do think the prevailing principle is true in the sense that if we really want to have 3A have competitive balance, then we need to treat it differently than we have in the past. And we need to have the private charter schools compete against themselves because that's how they get their students, is a completely different way from the public schools, how we get our students.
And Mr. Wakefield, I'm going to say one thing to what you just said. When you said this is not a perfect proposal, one does not exist. There is not going to be a perfect proposal coming from anybody. Mr. Jackson, you've had your hand raised for quite a while, sir. I apologize. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you, guys. In my role as historian here, I think that's what you called me, Bart. A couple of things come up that I think as we move forward with these proposals, we need to be very cognizant of. One is there are schools at the bottom of the 3A private charter division in the South that are not currently 3A. that would be warranted in a discussion with them as to whether or not that would be a regulation change, because they are enrollment based completely. The second thing is, Bart, correct me if I'm wrong, and please do so. How many, actually, you're not even gonna correct me, I'm gonna ask you a question. How many enrollment-based 3A schools currently exist in the South? Not, and I'm talking including the multiplier. So that's the first question I think we need to look at. The second question I think we would have to look at too is, if you notice this, it's a 3A private charter division in the South only. If we remove a couple of those schools, we have to be cognizant that we fall under the regulation for the number of schools in a division, which is currently at 9. I know we've talked about that. The other thing is, I would want to make sure that we consider this. 20 years ago, Bart, when we started this the first time, the first thing we did was we figured out a way to maintain the 3A in the South, because we were down to Virgin, Moapa, and Boulder. Because Pahrump had crossed over with their enrollment number, Faith Lutheran was over with their enrollment number, and we were running out of teams for them to play. We looked at it from a standpoint of, we need to have 9 in the state. Well, I think we might be at a precipice here where we can, as an association, as an organization, or as a committee, go back to the standard that 3A is enrollment based only. And in making them 3A enrollment based only, then look at what we have left and we realign the remaining in the 4A/5A, so that the 3A then becomes a pure line in the sand where we have 3A schools are enrollment based only. Now, what would that mean? That's why I'd like to know what other schools are we looking at with the multiplier that would be setting there. Perhaps there's a point there, because the last point I want to ask is this too. The 3A private charter division, are we excluding out any other private or charter school that would want to play in that? For example, what if Democracy Prep says, oh, wait, I like this. Would that be a consideration? Democracy Prep drop into that 3A private charter? Maybe Mater does, maybe the Meadows does, maybe Bishop Manogue does. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying, have we opened up a new lane? I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm saying this has just spawned a lot of consideration on my part when I'm thinking about the history of this. Because when we first started this, the idea was we had to find teams for the 3A to play. Now we've got a position where we may not have to find teams. We may have the teams for the 3A to play, and we can look at it from a whole new different perspective, if that makes any sense. And that's just throwing out stuff that I was thinking about as you guys were talking. I saw Dallas nodding up there a couple of times, so hopefully that meant I didn't kick the mule too hard.
Go ahead, Mr. I'm gonna let Mr. Marcuzes jump in real quick first. Go ahead.
No, I just more of a comment to Mr. Jackson's thoughts around this whole thing. I think, I know this isn't the group that will propose this, but I think if we're having these conversations about enrollment and size and charter private, and with the NAC, keeping the NAC in mind with some of this, especially with the 9-school provision, obviously we would want Mr. Anderson to engage in this next legislative session, along with Tim and other members of the NIAA, to be able to just, shape those NACs so that we can make this all fit. Again, like you've mentioned already, Bart, several times, will be no perfect realignment plan. We know that. We're just trying to get it to be as fair in terms of competitive balance as possible, knowing full well not everyone's going to be happy. So I just wanted more of a comment to kind of just kudos to Tim's points that he just made.
Mr. Larson, you've got your hand up, then I'll jump in real quick, and anybody else that wants to speak, please go ahead. But Mr. Larson, please.
Yeah, Tim, it depends on what sport, really, how many are 3A, because of the sport enrollment. There's a lot of basketball schools, because almost every school, whether they're charter or public, have basketball, but football, there's less, right? So kind of depending on the sport. And I think me and Coach Wakefield talked about the exact same thing. Once again, the names that are listed up here, I don't think are set in concrete. It's the fact that, like you said, Democracy Matter Meadows, I said the Meadows should be down, and in my opinion, down. They're barely 3A, so they belong more lower, unless they chose to go up to the 4A like they did in tennis and different sports. So I think that there's some fluidity to this plan. The only thing I would say, once again, is I've said this to a lot of our 3A members, as we've had lots of charters come in, so we have quite a few schools, but as they continue to grow, they leave, and but there's more charters coming. So I think the 3A might be if we just do the enrollment, could be a stopping ground for 2 or 3 years for a charter as they are growing, and then if they move up, unless there's a league like this where they come in, like Coach Wakefield has proposed there, and then it would just be those small. But then once again, that takes us back down to the four Southern school 3A schools by enrollment.
Hey, Bart,
Yeah.
this is
Mr.
Tony. Can I a couple questions? I know you haven't got to your proposal yet, but would your proposal alleviate some of this? Because I'm gonna be honest with you, as a 4A, 5A guy, this just looks like a way to get charters and privates out of 3A on the surface. And then we got to deal with the problems that 3A is dealing with at that level. But with your proposal, would that, I'm just curious with what you've presented, if it would then look similar to what Coach Wakefield has presented here.
It could. Obviously, everybody might not know what we're talking about just yet, and we're going to get to my proposal here a little bit later on in the meeting. It could. It does leave some flexibility for the shaping of leagues, which may alleviate some of this. What it doesn't do is it doesn't necessarily push some of those schools that Mr. Wakefield has listed in 4A necessarily into a 4A. It doesn't create a separate division for private and charters, but they could maybe be in their own little league, depending on how we choose to do things. And I don't want to get too far down the road on that yet, but I do appreciate that. I want to get back to Mr. Jackson's question about the number of schools. Mr. Larson's 100% correct. Really depends on what we're talking about here. This proposal in front of us from Mr. Wakefield is boys basketball only. And we are starting to see that from some of the groups. Obviously, we've seen from Mr. Morocco earlier in this meeting, a football proposal for football only. There's one I know is coming, I just haven't gotten it yet, that is baseball only. That's up to this committee as to whether you want to handle proposals that might be very different from sport to sport. And again, keeping in mind, well, following the NAC in whatever this committee decides, whenever we decide it, however many hurdles we go through. The Board of Control is the one who's going to make the final say on this. What we come up with is a proposal. It is not something that is necessarily guaranteed to be accepted, no matter what that proposal is going forward. I'm monopolizing this right now. Any other questions for Mr. Wakefield regarding his proposal and what you see in front of, or Mr. Larson, since he's a part of this presentation as well? Any questions among what we see here?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mr. Kofer.
Just regarding this proposal, is there any, looking beyond this setup, is there any thought to having the champions participate at the end, the individual public champion and the, I hate to say this term, private charter, it drives me nuts. I'll get on the record right now that the way we enroll students at charter schools is not the same as how private schools enroll the students. And it's not exactly the same as how public schools enroll their system, but it is not the same as private schools. So, but back to the question, is there any forward thinking that the various champions would then come together and have a super state championship? I'm kind of asking that to Mr. Wakefield and Mr. Larson from the development of this.
I can answer that. Mine is more from a baby steps. If this, I didn't know if I was going to get pitchfork and burned at the stake for even suggesting that we separate public from private. So if this is palatable to people and it makes sense, then I think that would be fantastic to do something like that. But we'd have to get down and separate before we can come back and do a championship, but that'd be fun.
And Mike, I think I said this last time when this got presented, I'm here to represent the whole 3A South. This was one coach that came to me and I was willing to have this platform to discuss it in my own capacity yet. I haven't decided if this is a yes or a no for me right now, based on what I see here, but I wanted this platform to be able to at least get the discussion out there and see what the committee thought and get everyone's ideas on this. So the only way to get this out here was to have me as a committee member bring it forward. And I do see some merits, but I see some things that, you know, I kind of worry about as well. But I'm not saying this is, I want to make sure everyone knows I'm here to be a 3A South representative in a lot of things. So
Yeah.
Mike,
and I mean, I hope, you know, everyone knows, I mean, we've been, you know, a solid fixture, I think, in the 3A since we started. I mean, I feel like we've been a good member, but, you know, looking into the proverbial crystal ball and taking into a little bit of what Mr. Jackson said, you know, looking forward into this, you know, my fear for the 3A is going to end up being Moapa, Virgin, and Boulder. And that's going to be it. From a public school standpoint, you know, so I'm kind of looking at the teams that are here, and I know what kind of where their enrollments are from some of the surveys I've done. You know, now on a success factor relegation advancement system, I don't know where they would be, but just looking at that, you know, you're getting a little thin down there. Maybe.
Other questions for Mr. Wakefield or Mr. Larson? Mr. Wakefield, Mr. Larson, anything else you'd like to add regarding this at this point?
Just one thing real quick. This is the box that we're trying to put the pearl in, and the prevailing principle is just trying to say, all right, it's not just this year, but if you go back 2 years, Somerset Losi dominated for 2 years, and then they got moved up. And then we got 3 more Losis back into 3A. So I think the rubric and the enrollment just is a great framework for 4A, 5A, 2A, but it has not been for 3A. Again, we're talking about the 2 top teams beat everybody by 40 in public school wise. And they went 38-0. You add that to Losis, and you're looking at 50 wins and 1 loss over a 3-year period. So again, if this box doesn't fit, throw it away, figure out what's going to put the pearl to get teams, the competitive balance, so that schools can compete within 3A with like teams, because we haven't had that in a long time. And I would rather have 3 teams that could play each other competitively. When you're talking, we can always play each other in squads and games and things like that. But when it comes to a state championship, if you're a 16-year-old kid and you say, I could go and wrestle and maybe I'd get to a state championship. If I go play basketball, we're going to get beat by 40. It's a tough draw to be able to get people into a gym when they're going to get waxed by 40.
Mr. Marcoussis.
Welcome to 5A football.
Welcome. 4A girls basketball was the same way.
Mr. Marcoussis, you had your hand up.
No, I just wanted to continue to just thank Coach Wakefield for his proposal, because I really do that this at least provides some strong conversation around some solutions we ought to consider as a group. I know that there's another proposal forthcoming, but I think we ought to continue to think in this manner around how we can create competitive balance. I know there's some enrollment challenges between the groups. Hearing Coach Kofer even mention, like, charter is different than private versus public. And then even within public, you know, I'm one of those schools, magnet and zone as well. Not that I'm proposing that canyons alike ought to be considered in that, but I think there are some, if they're competitive balance along with the way the strategic way in which people are enrolled ought to be considered as we put a proposal forward for realignment, because there are other examples in our state where certainly enrollment benefits have benefited schools because of the uniqueness of their enrollment. So I think this is a great first step into having those conversations with those considerations. But thanks again, Coach, for taking a bold step on this.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Wakefield, thank you for joining us today with this. Thank you for presenting it. I'm putting it in the full packet of everything we've got for proposals, and you know, our legal counsel is gonna tell me certain things and gonna tell our committee certain things, and bottom line is we had to look at a lot of things here and try to figure out what's going to be best for as many people as we can make it best for. So again, thank you, sir. I know you've been very, very involved in this process and very willing to come and make comments. So you're taking it really seriously, and we definitely appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone, for all of your work and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. I don't want to leave you out of the kudos either. You were a big part of this as well. And thank you for that too.
Oh, Coach Wakefield's doing a lot of work. So thanks, Coach, for presenting today. I'm glad we were able to get you, get that out there, get a little discussion going, and then hopefully we can lead to a good situation for all 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, all of them.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back into our packet, and hopefully you've had a chance to look through what is pages 11 through 18, and it's involved. And this is what our office would be proposing as more than talking points, let's say, for realignment purposes. This comes pretty close to mirroring what we have right now, with the exception of it does change the rubric, which those are magic words. What this does is I've talked with some of you separately on this committee, kind of one-on-one, and proposed this, and it does lead to a lot of questions. What this does is it changes the rubric into something called a pairwise ranking. The rubric still exists, but it's only a portion of how we would have a measurement for each school. The pairwise ranking, for those of you familiar with it, is something that college hockey uses. They use it to select their teams for the NCAA tournament. They used to use an RPI system and decided it wasn't good enough. And our rubric is loosely based on an RPI system. This pairwise ranking takes every team that is eligible for the rubric in their half of the state and compares them to each other, one-on-one, head-to-head, over the entirety of a rubric cycle or a realignment cycle. It compares their common opponents and the winning percentage that they garnered against those opponents. And then it compares their total rubric score as well. So there's 3 different factors that go into it. It is still a success factor, which would kind of satisfy what we have in the NAC right now, but it does kind of add layers to the rubric. You can see a lot of that on your screen. I'm not going to read it all to you, but it would take team A and team B and compare them. Then it would take team A against team C and so forth all the way. Whoever wins the comparison gets a pairwise point. Whichever school, once we get through all 40, however many of them there are, has the most points, they're number 1 in our overall pairwise. The next best is number 2, and so forth. If there are ties, if, for instance, each team's got 1 point at the end, the rubric would be the tiebreaker. I have said from the start with Mr. Thompson, our former executive director, that the rubric was really kind of our baby. It was also the child that I kind of wanted and didn't really want, because there were some better answers out there. This is one of those better answers. Changing the rubric a little bit is one of those better answers in my eyes. May not be true for everybody. But that's one way we can look at this, where we compare and say, okay, well, team A beat everybody in each of these comparisons. They're obviously at the top. Team B beat everybody else. They're obviously next. And we kind of look and we see where those common grounds are, and we see where the disparities exist. What is also included in here, and it's a lot of the stuff that's already in our timeline, policies, and procedures from our last committee, kind of explains how that rubric works, where we have winning percentage. We have a strength of schedule component, which is your opponent's winning percentage adjusted based on what classification they're in. They're the opponent's winning percentage. We also have playoff bonuses, and we have non-competitive losses. That's how you get your score for 1 year for the rubric. That's for our sports listed there. Our, for lack of a better term, our team standing / bracketed sports. We have other sports as we go down, and we've kind of described, and again, this is all A in your packet, but B in past policies and procedures for the processes that we've gone through. Bowling is a little bit different. as you know, we have been taking the team average pin totals there, but bowling also, we have combined boys and girls because there are considerations for availability of lanes and availability of coaches. Golf, we have scored differently to be kind of closer to the average score in relation to par over the course of your regular season matches. Cross country is also one where in this last rubric cycle, this last alignment cycle, we ended up combining boys and girls, taking their separate scores and combine them. And that was a coach's issue that came to us from the cross country coaches specifically. Swimming and diving, another one where we've combined the boys and girls scores because you have a coaching issue. You also have a facility issue there. I don't want to get too deep in the woods on this. We're already talking a lot. Track and field's another one where the boys and the girls scores have been combined, and we base both swimming and track and field on just postseason meets only. On that region meet is where we do that one because everybody has the same opportunity in their region meet to garner points. Wrestling, apologize for the page breaks on these, don't know how that quite happened, but wrestling, we have done postseason as well. Teams score based on its percentage of points in the region meet and in the state meet. Nothing really changes there. And again, let me please underscore on this. This is nothing more than a proposal coming from our office. This is not our office trying in any way to say this is the way to go. This is what we need to do. This is a proposal like any other proposal that has come forward. When we get to the classification of teams in this proposal, 1A and 2A, you're coming. I promise you're still in this item. We're going to talk to you about that as to whether or not they would remain classified by the enrollment of each school. That's something we need to talk to those classifications about. The decision to make 3A schools like a Boulder City, like a Moapa Valley, like a Virgin Valley, 3A based only on their enrollment, we know that's going to be something this group talks about, right? And that applies to all sports. That's something we need to get into down the road here to see where everybody stands. Basically, on the bottom line is this, is we are looking at proposing that teams be classified really for the postseason only. This is a little bit of a change from the way we currently do things. In our team bracketed, our standings-based sports, we currently make those classifications applicable to the league that you're in, and you qualify for the postseason based on where you finish in the league that you're in. This part of the proposal would do away with that. It would allow you to be classified only for your postseason tournament. Says it doesn't matter who you play during the course of the regular season. That, I think, was part of the question that was asked before about would this be something that kind of hooked into the NIA office proposal. This could also allow us, if we didn't classify by league, to maybe open up the possibility of having the North have some teams in 5A, some teams in 4A, making all of the state championships be North-South, have teams from both involved in them. I'm skimming through a lot of this. I'm going to let a lot of you read this. You'll have the ability to ask questions just as we do on any other proposal. But our postseason tournament, as you see here, would no longer be seeded strictly by league finish. We would look at all-in tournaments with the exception of football and have those tournaments that you're going to. Let me take for instance. We have 6 schools in a league. 2 of them in that league are 5A, the other 4 are in 4A. They're playing each other in their league because geographically it makes sense to play them, because maybe this is a league they all wanted to be in. We've heard a lot of comments, complaints. I heard them from Foothill last week when they got off the bus at Shadow Ridge. Why do we have to travel an hour to play a league game? This kind of alleviates some of that. You can be in a league with whoever you want to be in. I did not for this proposal come up with individual leagues because, again, I don't want to lead this committee down a path any which way. Football, we would look at having some sort of different, not rubric, success factor. Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you want to speak to this or not. You and I both came from Ohio. Ohio has used a point system to determine its football playoff teams for years and years and years, and I know they changed them recently. We would do that for football. For our other tournaments, we would have coaches meet, coaches seed that tournament. Again, they do that in other states. Are there arguments? Yes. Does it cause problems? Sometimes. But in the end, nobody really goes out to get anybody else in those meetings. They place them where they think they should go because you don't want to be the team that angered somebody and have to play them. Could lead to baseball and softball having to get away from that double elimination format. That's going to be controversial to our baseball coaches. For some of our other sports, bowling and golf, we'd probably need to stay with where we're at because of facility issues. We couldn't say you'd have an all-in tournament. We'd have to go with qualifiers there. Getting down to the leagues portion of this, again, we've said leagues have been shaped by classification. You wouldn't have to be. If, again, I'll use an example, not saying that this would have to be, but basic Coronado, Foothill, Green Valley, Liberty, and Silverado, you can pretty much throw a blanket over them geographically. If they all wanted to be in the same league in a lot of sports, because that's who they want to play, that's who their geographical rivals are, that's who they've always played, why are we preventing that? Why do we have to prevent that? They can all split up and go their separate ways for different tournaments. When I was in Ohio, we had a league that was very near to me that had 8 teams in it and had teams from Division II, Division III, and Division IV, all in the same league. They were in different sports. At one point, they had girls basketball teams in that league ranked in the top 10 in the state in 3 different classifications. Played each other because they were rivals. They drew well when they played each other. They enjoyed playing each other, even if it meant they knew one team was better than the other one. When Eastwood played Elmwood, it was always a battle. They could have played Tiddlywinks and drawn 500 people. We could still do league championships. We could still have banners for that sort of stuff. That would really be up to what everybody wanted to do. I've thrown a lot of information at you in 6 minutes or 7 or 10 or whatever it was. Again, I would want everybody to review this the same as they would any other proposal that comes forward. But I would open it up at this point for comments or questions. Mr. Jackson, you were quick. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Bart. And I want to iterate something that was said earlier. Ty said, you know what? I don't care if we only have 3 or 4 teams. We want to play each other. That's what this kind of creates. This creates a situation where you could have a league, because at the end of the day, the league is the league, and there's no requirement that be dictated and mandated by alignment. It can be dictated and mandated by the way you're geographically located. There's a lot of benefits. I'm not trying to push you down one path or the other, but I will tell you that the one thing Bart hit on is this is where we've seen this in other states, not just Ohio, where we just both happen to be from. Illinois, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, California. I mean, there are all these different variations around that we can look at that pull some of these different things. So I really would like people to take a deep look into this and ask questions. Talk to your coaches about this. How many of us have said, and we've all said it to each other at least once, why am I driving by 3 schools I could be playing to go play a league game? This takes that out. And the postseason remains the postseason. We have qualifying standards, for lack of better terms, that gets us there. So I really like the precipice that we're on. Again, another precipice, I like that word today, that we're getting onto, that we could be looking at different options. And I think it would do our association great to really look beyond what we've created with the rubric to what it can become next. I'm a big fan of pairwise. I know that system. I like what that system can do. I think it's a natural growth in our rubric that I think it's the time has come that we look at maybe developing the rubric to a deeper, more in-depth, using great words here today, in-depth look at what we have created. So please, I'm glad to answer any questions as well. But Bart, thank you for this.
Jackson, thank you. And I won't hold that against you being a former English teacher or anything like that either. Mr. Cole, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I guess I'll also pull back on some historical knowledge since I think I've been around just as long as the rubrics and all of those things. Also, I remember sitting in Las Vegas High School, Mojave High School, having meetings with several people about these things. And so a word of just, I guess, caution or warning, I think, as we start to transition to whatever the next phase of NIA athletics look like. And in many ways, I agree with what this proposal could be and what pairwise could be. But when we start talking about the easy thing, which is geographical, and I think that is the easy thing, there certainly was a reason why we went away from just geographical.
Yes.
Right? Geographical certainly did create haves and have-nots, at least here in Southern Nevada. And I know this because I was sitting on a campus that then couldn't field football teams, couldn't field soccer teams, could barely field basketball teams, boys or girls, all of those types of things. And we're struggling to field those things again, even though we're successful in many things. So, and one of the quickest way for all of us to struggle even more is to get beat up by our geographical rivals every single day. That'd be the quickest way for our athletic programs to go right back to not being able to field those teams. And from a culture standpoint on a campus, the quickest way to go from being what I consider today's Mojave to old Mojave is to have unsuccessful activities and athletic programs. So it's not that I don't think we need to evolve. I think we do need to evolve as a NIA, but I think I certainly think that we need to cut back on some travel and make it easier. And I think we should get our coaches' input. I think all of those things. And I think Bart and Tim, I think you guys know that and understand, don't mishear me say that I don't think we need to do some of those things and that we don't need to evolve, because we do. But I think we need to also not just take the easiest thing, which is, hey, neighborhood rivalries, because I think neighborhood rivalries are good. I think they're important, but we also have to make sure that we can provide opportunities for students to participate and engage on campuses. And if we change so much that it discourages participation, then that's a concern for me. And I know that because I've been here. I've been on this campus while that occurred as a result. So I think we need to do something different. And I think this is probably the right framework, but I think we have to tread carefully when we do that. So that's just kind of my word of caution.
Mr. Cole, thank you. And I want to stress on this. This is not me saying we go back to the old Northwest, Southwest, Northeast, Southeast. That's
Agreed.
Yeah, we're looking, as it says here up on your screen in that first paragraph, leagues need not even be the same for each sport as we look at it. And perhaps we have a situation where, let me use kind of a geographic area for you. Mojave and Legacy, you're both in the room. You guys are not far from each other geographically. Certain sports you may play, you are far from each other competitively. Right. And maybe that's not a right matchup for you because, as Mr. Cole said, that sends the spiral down a little bit for one of those schools. But are there certain sports in certain leagues, maybe boys basketball for one, where those two teams could go out and play each other on a Tuesday, have a great crowd and be competitive, and they should be league rivals? Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there some like maybe a baseball or a softball where maybe that's not the case? Absolutely. And do we look at maybe with a Mojave playing in a league with a Cheyenne at that point or certain other schools? That's something I think that is, if we were to, again, not to promote one proposal or another.
Yeah.
If we were to go with something like this, when we sit down and actually do the leagues, that part of the discussion that Mr. Cole just mentioned really becomes a huge factor in it as well.
Agree. That's what I think is important. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make, right? Because I think people, as long as people don't then want to take the easy way and say, hey, right, I think that's the important. The work then becomes, right, making sure that we're honest, making sure that we're really looking at it instead of just saying, because everybody that sits in the seats that some of us are on don't have that understanding or that acknowledgement of why that's important and why we would do that. So I think that's the important part. You said that much better than me, Bart, but that's basically what I'm trying to say, right?
I don't say things better than many people, but thank you, Mr. Cole. Yes, but it's again, the other part of this that I'm going to stress to this committee as well. When we look at any of these proposals, Mr. Wakefield's proposal from earlier, Mr. Morocco's proposal, what we saw in our last meeting, there's nothing to say that we can't all look at all these proposals and say, I like this part from this proposal. I like this part from this proposal. I like this part from this proposal. Can we bring them together in something that maybe nobody's thought of yet? Any questions, comments, anything else regarding this one before we move on?
Bart, yeah, Mike Hofer Slam.
Go ahead, Coach. Yeah.
Why would baseball, softball have to possibly pare down to a single elimination in something like this?
If we went to an all-in tournament, we would either have to look at, and again, I kind of draw on my experience from being in Ohio. They started the postseason tournament while teams were still playing their regular season. Simply because if you went to an all-in, let's say there were 16 teams in a classification. If you do a double elimination tournament, you've got to play either 30 or 31 games. That's a lot for the way we do things now for a postseason. We might have to look at kind of changing it up and shifting that around a little bit, or we'd have to look at possibly going single elimination just to take a number of those games out. Because if we tried to play a 16-team double elimination tournament in a short period of time, there's a whole lot of games and nobody'd have any pitching in baseball, and that would be a real problem. But I don't think I've said it from the start, we got a whiteboard here. We can do the things we need to do. That's a big change, and trying to fit something that big into a small period of time might be a little difficult. That's the reason I say that. Mr. Jackson, I've talked to you quite a bit about this. Everybody knows the position you're coming into as well here in a month or two with taking over as executive director in this association. You will have more than your fair share of headaches over alignments and everything else we do. Anything else you wanted to add or ask regarding this part of the proposal?
Not with this particular proposal, but I did want to make sure that we do one thing for this committee, and Lou hit on it early too, is let's make sure that as a committee, as we're going down there, we're always throwing into the conversation. This might be a football proposal, but we need to consider basketball, volleyball, baseball, softball, so that we don't end up in a rabbit hole where we just come up with one proposal that works for one sport and don't look at the others. And I don't think that happened. I think the football proposal had pieces that would be great in other sports. I think coach's proposal had pieces that would be great in other sports as well. But I think that's my biggest ask for this group is that it's don't go down a rabbit hole, because we've gone down that rabbit hole before, and then we ended up having to extend the committee because of that rabbit hole. But no, that's all, Bart. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments about this one?
Yeah, Bart, I don't know if it's possible. I mean, I'm a visual guy.
Sure.
Is there any way to put together a example
Of leagues?
what if this had been in place, last alignment, what would it, or last year, I don't know. And it doesn't have to be the complete thing, but just something that's, oh, okay, I see how it works, Yep.
Mr. Kofer, yes. I will tell you that the pairwise ranking, and I went through and did it kind of over a 2-year period and tried to apply it to some past results too. It takes a lot of freaking coding in Google Sheets. It is not, I wouldn't put it forward if it wasn't something I thought might work, because it's a lot of work to get it done. But yes, we can do that. And then I can kind of shape out
That's why I said not the whole thing, Bart.
I know, but man,
Just make a cupcake, not the whole cake,
just give me a slice, give me a brownie. Yeah, we could do that. And just kind of look at where certain teams would go. Also, I could do proposed leagues as well. Again, Mr. Jackson, who I referred to as our historian, will remember this. Some other people will remember this very well too. I don't want anything to be like what it was like when we met at Legacy 15 years ago after Mr. Bonine's proposal came out, and I thought we were going to have a riot. I don't want anybody to think just because, hey, Bart came up with this, it must be what we're going with. No, that's not the case. Bart came up with a proposal the same way other people did. And we need to figure out as a committee what we feel is going to be best. Mr. Larson, you've got your hand up and it's going to save me from babbling. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I know part of the thing when I don't know if I didn't hear you talk about was that having some kind of coaches meeting to help on that proposal as well. I know that scares me a little bit when we just kind of the little discussions I've had, because I've been in coaches meetings as an athletic director. So that part kind of worries me when you have coaches together trying to determine the seeds of things at that point. But maybe with Ohio, you can give more detail about that.
I've sat in some of those meetings when I coached back in Ohio, where you go to a sectional meeting. Ohio has things like sectionals, and districts, and regionals and states. And you have your group of coaches that come together and they seed their little sectional tournament. And generally 7, 8 teams, something along those lines. And they get together and everybody goes and puts their record up on the chalkboard. Well, in this case, we'd probably have these meetings virtually and I'd probably be sitting in most of them. You have your record, you have your little resume. This is what we did all season long. This is who we beat. These are the teams we lost to. This is why we think we should be the number 1 seed, the number 2 seed, so forth. And the coaches sorry, I just realized that meeting is misspelled in that. The coaches all kind of hash it out together and then we have a vote. Okay, who's our vote for the number 1 seed? Do coaches get contentious? Yes, the same way they do in an all league meeting. And many of you have sat in those where you're voting for all league. That stuff gets a little argumentative. But at the end of the day, they end up seeding the teams 1 through whatever it is. We place them on the bracket and we go. And again, nobody gets too terribly bent out of shape by the time the meeting ends, because you're not out to, for lack of a better term, screw a team that you might end up having to face at some point in this tournament, because all they need is the incentive of you screwed them in the meeting, they're going to come and get you. Have I ever seen one lead to a knockdown drag out? No. The coaches realize at the end of the day, we got to get this right and we got to get out of here because we all want to go to sleep. But they do end up getting it right. Do you have upsets in those tournaments? Of course you do. There was a tournament, Mr. Jackson, you're going to remember this, you're going to love this. It's a school called Gibsonburg back in Ohio. They played in a league, that league that I talked about with some Division II, Division III teams, and they went 0-22 during the regular season. They still made the tournament in baseball. They made their Division IV tournament. They were seeded 6th in their sectional. Gibsonburg won 2 games in the sectional, 2 in the district, 2 in the regional, 2 in the state, and a team that went 0-22 in the region tournament was your state, or the regular season was your state champion. It was one of the funniest things I'd seen. But they were placed in a league with teams they wanted to play during the season, teams that were slightly bigger than they, that were better than they. They went to the coaches meeting and they took whatever the coaches gave them and they said, okay, we'll be this seed. And they won 8 straight games in the postseason and they were a state champion. That kind of stuff happens. It's kind of fun when it does. It means that your regular season might not be the death knell of your team. You get to go on and play against teams we think you're competitive against and go to the postseason. But yes, does it happen where it gets a little contentious, it gets a little argumentative? Anytime you get coaches in a room together, sure does. Anytime you get a group of people in a room together, sure does. But I think that's something as an NIA staff, and that's something Mr. Jackson and I would need to talk about more. We'd have a staff member in each of those meetings just to make sure things ran without too many problems. Does that kind of help you, Mr. Larson, or did I just talk in circles? or potentially both.
No, that's, I know that, like I said, I didn't hear that. I know that was part of your proposal when I was reading through it, and I just kind of, for some reason, I pictured the rubric, the pairwise would give the rankings, and then the coaches would have the meeting to make sure, oh yeah, but that didn't quite work because I thought it was more of the pairwise would set the rankings, and then the coaches could then, oh no, that didn't quite get it right for this year, rather than the coaches just, all right, starting at 0, we go. So
we would use the pairwise to put you in a classification. This is the classification you're going to go to for postseason. Okay. How you get seated within that individual tournament, because you might be in a league with somebody who's in a different classification altogether. The seeding for that tournament, once we know where you're classified, the baseball coaches would come together for the baseball season and seed their tournament. The soccer coaches for boys or for girls, either one would come together and seed their tournament. The classification that you're in would be determined either by your enrollment, which we currently have for 1A, 2A, and to a certain extent 3A, or by the pairwise rankings. The coach's involvement would be strictly for seeding teams for that tournament once we get to that point in the season.
So as a committee, we could take yours and then we could say, instead of having the coaches meeting, we're going to use, I know Max Preps has been brought up, or we're going to use this to get to seedings for the term. So we could use yours, but then modify it if we don't want to do these coaches meetings. Okay.
Yep. I mean, that's something we need to decide as a committee and put forward in our proposal, right? It's not something that we could decide a year from now and say that goes in. This took forever, but I'm not married to it. If we need to make changes, or if this committee decides this is not what we want at all, fine. We're gonna press on one way or another. But we need to, again, we just need to find what's best for as many as we can. And I'm not by any means going to try to tell everybody that this is the best thing out there. That's not me, and that's not what this is about. Mr. Marcoussis.
Would this include everyone in the state? So when we do the postseason play, are we still saying kind of do the South, then do the North and come together? Or would we try to do a whole state reseeding? So, obviously the number 1 team could be in the North playing a number 8 team in the South, and so on and so forth. Is that part of this plan, or is it just regional then getting to a whole state?
This plan, and again, let's take the 1A and 2A out for right now, because when you say everybody in the state, some people might get the kind of the wrong impression there. But if you said like every 4A team in the state, for instance, I think that's kind of what you're asking.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
For example. Yeah.
No, it would still keep them regionally. And the reason behind that is I don't know that I'd want necessarily one team from one half or the other of the state to have to start with the transportation end of things up and down. And I don't believe it. Especially our major 2 districts, Washoe and Clark, they'd be anyway on board with any sort of transportation that would involve that. If it were, 16, a 32 team tournament, 24 team tournament, whatever it would happen to be, I think we would still probably, due to cost concerns, transportation concerns, probably still need to stay regionally in that end of things, unless Mr. Jackson, I think you've talked to Ms. Sloan about this a little bit. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything like that, but obviously you're still with Clark County School District. It doesn't sound like that would be terribly palatable to the district, having to spend that much more in transportation costs or time out of school. If we
I
were
don't
to
need
cross
to
from the
go
start.
down and check on that one, Bart. I can answer that question in the affirmative. That it would definitely be no. That is definitely something CCSD would not want to partake in, with just the sheer volume of travel we're looking at. And I can't imagine putting that together in any way, shape, or form without kids missing extensive amounts of academic time, exorbitant costs. And let's just be honest, we would take away the buildup, the anticipation, because if you're Minogue and you're coming all the way down to play Desert Oasis in baseball, I don't know how many of your fans are going to be able to make those trips numerous times back and forth. So I would not be shocked if her answer would be like, no, please don't. But she's right down the hall. I can check if you like, but I think we're on good grounds here.
if she's listening on YouTube right now, there's a little bit of a delay, but I'm quite surprised we haven't heard the no coming already. Yeah, so it's probably there. Other questions or comments? There's some other stuff we still need to get to in this meeting, and I don't want to keep you guys forever, but I don't want to rush you either.
Bart, I did just receive the text message confirming exactly, there's a second no. So we're at a double no.
It's funny how after all this time, Mr. Jackson, you and I could anticipate that answer. But no, and that's not just a Clark thing or a Washoe thing. Also, that could be an Elko thing as well, depending on how the playoffs are structured. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, and so the proposals we've received so far could meld with your proposal quite easily. What we're saying from all these, from whoever the coaches, that would create the leagues, and then your proposal could meld right to the postseason.
I don't know that I'd use the phrase quite easily, but it could certainly, yeah, we could find ways to shape them. Sure. Yeah. We got a lot of smart people in this room. None of them are me, but we've got a lot of smart people in this room who could come together and find ways to put this all together. Okay. Anything else on this proposal?
Bart, I'm going to step away from my camera for a moment. I have a transportation request I have to take care of.
Yeah, funny we mentioned transportation. Yeah, that's fine, Mr. Jackson. Thank you. Moving on, what you see on pages 19 through 24 of your packet are other proposals we've received for previous meetings. My goal, along with the help of our office staff, is to try to shape all these proposals, keep them all together in one spot so that we can give them back to this committee and say, okay, these are everything we've received and all the different proposals. We don't want to ask you to have to keep track of them. We'll keep track of them. We'll get them back to you. We'll probably talk about them again in the next meeting. And that way they're there for you to review when you wish to review them. This packet also will be up on the NIA website if it's not already, so other people can review them as well. The other thing I want to talk about under policies and procedures, our 1A and 2A people have been patiently waiting. This is a question I asked the group when we sent out the invitation for this meeting and talked about different dates. Our 1A people in the room, I think Mr. Vick, Ms. Formaster, Mr. Katz, Mr. Baldwin may all still be here. Currently, under our policies and procedures, what we're operating under for this alignment cycle, our 1A has been strictly enrollment based. From what you've talked to with your colleagues in the 1A, from what you have talked maybe amongst each other, our 1A people, do you envision for this next cycle? Not saying this has to be your final answer right now. It's just discussion. Do you envision still being classified strictly by enrollment within the 1A? Is that something your 1A group still wants?
This is David Vick, 1A. That's what we discussed at our state meetings, and that's what we had come to agreement on, that we would just stay enrollment numbers.
Part of the proposal that we're offering up here would also allow for leagues to be a little bit different if you wanted them to be. Not saying the 1A needs to be, but it's something to think about as well. Of maybe you stay classified as 1A based on your enrollment, but during the regular season, if it helps, you play some teams around you, we could shape leagues that way as well. Something to think about, something to discuss. Anybody else 1A wise want to chime in? I know Mr. Vick kind of summed it up pretty well right there.
Miles Baldwin. I would I'm in agreement with David on that we stay enrollment, and at the state meeting, that's where we were at, kind of uniform with staying enrollment based. It'd just be too hard for us to go with a rubric and with transportation and our small school transportation issues.
Anything else from our other 1A representatives here? This sounds pretty cut and dry. Our 2A people in the room, Mr. Brooks, Ms. Scott, Mr. Parker, Mr. Fitzsimons. Same question to you regarding 2A. That enrollment factor, I believe, is 171 to 450 Within the 2A, you guys have traditionally been enrollment only for your classification. Is that the way the 2A is looking at wanting to go still as we continue moving forward?
Yeah, Bart, Sean Fitzsimons 2A South. I believe we discussed that as well as leagues and at the state level that we'd like to stay enrollment based. What we see happening in 2A, again, we've been helped with the multiplier, I guess, as far as teams moving to 3A. It's never really been a, like Mr. Wakefield had earlier, private charter or anything like it. But the multiplier, we've been living off of that. 2A has changed a lot. We've got a lot of 1A schools the last couple of years that are coming in and they're not really fielding all programs. That's been a main concern for us. But we are not the 3A. We are not the redheaded stepchild, middle child that gets all this stuff as much. But to sum it up, I would like to be, my opinion, yes, we should be enrollment based. Although I was just scratching stuff down here that some 1As, 2As, and 3As could be in a basketball league that you already had me excited about, which very well could come. So Ken Parker, Needles, you're not geographically close to Panaca, so sorry, bud. Just kidding.
Hey, neither's White Pine on a 2-day road trip we have coming up. I would agree on Sean on that one. 2A is definitely enrollment based that we've been working with, and I think it should stay that way.
That's something I think, gentlemen, probably in our next meeting, if that's something you guys want to stay with, we'll look at definitely shaping that into the framework of what we do, but you can certainly give consideration to however you'd want to go with leagues as well. I know 2A in the South may be really fighting some football issues as well, depending on how things go going forward.
That's definitely a challenge for the 2A with JV programs. That's really a big fight. Some of those programs coming in from the 1As coming up, the JV programs are really limited, and football's a big struggle for us.
Well, I know we had some situations too where Mr. Fitzsimons up in Panaca up there, beautiful Panaca. You had, was it Rancho, I think, that came up there for a game not too long ago?
Yes, on meeting.
So, I mean, as we look at different ways of shaping leagues, not to say Rancho and Lincoln County should necessarily be in the same league, but there's freedom to maybe we look at this a little bit differently of who you play and why you play. But just, again, all stuff to consider. I'm not making decisions on that right now because legal counsel would not be happy if we did.
Yeah, and Bart, if Mike Brooks is still on from Pershing, he could tell you how the North feels. I'm sure it's the same way.
Yeah, Mike Brooks, 2A North. I'm certain that I feel enrollment based is the way to go, and I don't think anyone in our league would question that at all.
And the reason we asked that question, just so everybody in the group knows, one size doesn't fit all for anything we do, right? Just because we want to have a different way of classifying 3A, 4A, 5A. If it's the flavor of the committee classifying differently in certain different types of schools, doesn't mean that necessarily fits for some of our smaller schools either. So we are kind of, as a committee, as an association, we're open to hearing all points of view here, and we want to try to do what's best for as many people as we can during the course of this. So everybody, thank you for the input there. You made it very clear what the 1A and the 2A would like to see happen. So again, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay. Item number 9, possibility of changing the Nevada Administrative Code. And this is where I can hear our legal counsel grating fingers on a chalkboard right now. Changing 385B 630, 385B 632, the number of teams needed in a classification for a state championship. And I believe this is pages 25 and 26 of your packet. We currently have, for both of those Nevada Administrative Code items, and this has been referenced already in this meeting, we have rules in place that say a state tournament for a sanctioned sport for a 1A or 2A or for a 4A, 3A or 4A region should not be scheduled or conducted until at least 9, or unless at least 9 teams from the region participate in the sanctioned sport during the season for the sanctioned sport. What I have kind of thought about with this, and some other people have too, is when we started to classify our 5A, we had a rule in there that said they had to have at least 9 teams. Well, because that's what they needed for a state championship. What I kind of thought about a little bit more is that 9th team was being put into 5A in some cases because we needed 9 to have a state championship. It wasn't because they were a good fit for that classification. It was because they needed 9. We look at certain sports like soccer, the 2A and 3A Northern people are going to bristle at this, but when they used to have that pod system, and then eventually we had to take the 2A and combine them with the 3A for soccer because there weren't enough teams to have a 2A soccer championship. There weren't 9. We were putting them into spots where maybe they just weren't competitive. Is this something as part of our alignment regulations? Because again, we're going to look at the number of teams going into classifications. Is this something we would like our Board of Control to look at changing? The reason I bring it up now, changing the NAC is going to take some time, right? We'd have to have some sort of membership hearing that would probably need to come at our next board meeting. We need to get the board on board with something like that and have the Legislative Council Bureau then be on board. I'm going to take down what I'm sharing right now, and I'm going to put up some possible language that we could maybe think about if we wanted to go this route. Under 1A in both 385B 630 and 385B 632, do we want to think about, and again, we are not the final judgment on this. This would have to go before the board. It would have to go before LCB. Adding the following language: the executive director or his or her designee may schedule and conduct a state tournament with fewer than 9 teams if he or she deems it necessary in order to maintain competitive balance within a classification. If we got to a point where a 2A started to drop in terms of the number of teams that they had playing a certain sport, and we wanted to keep those teams in 2A because the competitive balance said they really needed to be there. If we had a 5A situation again, where maybe we had 6 or 8 that were really competitive with each other, do we want to think about having that be a possibility where we could still hold a state championship and not have to push a 9th team into a classification where the eye test, the numbers, anything you want to measure it by would say that that team doesn't belong there? Open it up real quick for discussion on this one. What's everybody thinking? If you even have an opinion on this, Mr. Marcouzes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's worthy to make that shift. I know that there was some considerations from my understanding in football already. I think with the last realignment, I know the NRS, as I'm looking at it now, just really talks about the 1 through 4A classification. I know since we've redid the classifications in 1, 2, 3, specifically in football, there's been some accommodations or adjustments. So I just want to make sure that if we're proposing this language, I always get a little persnickety when it comes to some of the NACs in education policy, because we follow ones that we want to follow and we bend others that we don't. And if we're going to do this, I like the idea of the consideration of not having a number, because I think with some of the proposals initially discussed and even with some of the conversation, I actually really believe that this could make us give some malleability to make at least whatever realignment proposal made more palpable and have some consensus around it all the way around. So I do welcome kind of the shift in that, but I know that there has been some accommodations made in the previous realignment.
Thank you, Mr. Marcouzes. One thing I want to point out in this too is it does not, based on the language we have here, it does not automatically say, for instance, there would be a 1A state wrestling tournament or a 1A state cross-country meet. This would need to be the executive director or his or her designee deeming it necessary. Because maybe we look at a 1A wrestling and think, yeah, but there's only one or two teams that have full rosters in this. Is that really necessary at this point? Other comments? I'm not sure if Mr. Jackson's made it back or not, if he wants to comment on this. Mr. Brooks, you've unmuted. I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, this is something that I would definitely support. Just looking at the 3A soccer league, which includes a lot of 2A schools currently. I've been trying to figure out how to get one or two more schools into the 2A. I've asked schools to start programs and or maybe start a rubric with the 3A. It's just the competitive balance is just honestly all the traditional 2A schools outside of Incline and North Tahoe just get absolutely destroyed in soccer, and it's not fun for either team to play it. So I would 100% support something like this when necessary, such as 2A, 1A combining for soccer.
Any other comments on this? This is an action item on our agenda. It's for possible action. So at some point here, I want to have a little discussion. Mr. Marcoussis, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask, I mean, if I'm willing to make a motion, but if we can have further discussion, I know that could be part of the motion, but I mean, I won't make it yet if we still want to have some discussion.
I'll open it up and see here. If we want to have discussion, if anybody feels strongly about this one way or another, now's the time to speak up and please let us know your feelings on this.
Hey, Bart, this is
Mr.
Art
Anderson.
Anderson. Yeah, 4A North, 4A 5A North representative. I believe that if we don't make this change, then we can't work towards the competitive balance that we need to. And that's, I think, through all classifications, I think that 9 number is what has really hampered us a lot. So I absolutely believe that this is something that we need to have in order to keep going towards what we're trying to do. And again, there is no perfect proposal, but there is trying to make more competitive balances.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Anyone else want to comment on this? Okay. We will entertain a motion on this item.
Bart, I'm willing to make, Lou Marcoussis, for the record, like to make a motion to adopt the proposed change as presented for consideration in the next, I would imagine, legislative session. Is that an appropriate motion, sir, or should I revise it?
Not having a legal degree, I would say we're probably in good shape with that one.
All right. Okay. I want to make sure that I stated it accurately, mentioning the legislative session where this would need to be done. So,
thank
you. Yeah.
So we have a second.
I'll second this.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any further question or discussions? Again, this would go forward probably to, we'd need to advertise for a workshop at the next board meeting. It would be taken to the board at the next board meeting, which is in June, for their, be a recommendation to them for them to look at, to potentially pass and move forward with. Any other questions or discussion about it before we do that? Okay. I don't think we need to do a roll call vote here just yet. Let's kind of see how this goes, and if we need to, we will. But I'm going to ask that all in favor, please, whichever side you're going to vote on this, please do unmute and make your voice heard on this. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay. Thank you, everybody. We have passed that. We will send it forward to our Board of Control. We have a workshop at our next meeting. Anybody on our committee who'd like to talk about that too in our next board meeting, I would say certainly feel free to join us for that one as well. Let me get back to our actual agenda here. It's to continue to juggle screens. And we will move on to item number 10, which is any other comments for the good of the order. Committee members, anything else you would like to talk about before we depart today?
Bart, can I just ask one thing?
Sure can.
I just want to make sure if it was kind of during my comment under Coach Wakefield's, if there's something that we're going down that we're just not gonna, it's not gonna be able to work because of whatever knack, I'd rather find out sooner rather than later. So these coaches aren't wasting a lot of time trying to develop a system that's just gonna be thrown out. I don't know how, if there's a way we could.
I will talk with Mr. Paul Anderson regarding some of that. Again, it has been his request, maybe is the best way to put it, that we not look at changing the knack. I will tell you, as the chair of this committee, we need to do whatever's going to be best for as many people as we can do best for. If that means we need to go fight a battle to change the knack in some way, and our board agrees with us that we need to go fight that battle to change the knack in some way, then we'll fight the battle to change the knack in some way. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. I see Mr. Anderson's point as well of, if we keep coming back to the LCB wanting to change stuff left and right, they're going to think we have no idea what we're doing. And we've been heavily advised by legal counsel, is probably the best way to put it, to try to stay as much as we can within the guidelines of what was most recently passed through our LCB and adopted by our Board of Control. I would say if you're going to come with an idea that says I'm going to have 123 different classifications so everybody wins a different state championship, I'll tell you right now, probably not going to fly. But the stuff we've seen so far, I don't know that it's not up to me to judge, but I don't know that it's that far outside the knack that we couldn't find some common ground. But yeah, if we do have something that occurs, we definitely will say, look, probably not going to happen this time. But I also don't want to turn anybody away where maybe it's something we look at down the road too. Right? Other comments from our committee?
Real quick, Bart.
Mr. Anderson.
Would that mean that creating, for example, what was mentioned as one of the proposals coming from the South, football related, would that mean creating a 6A? That would be changing the knack, right? If a 6A is actually created.
If we were to create a 6A, yes. If we were to create an open division, which I think was mentioned, that one, I'm going to need Mr. Paul Anderson to get in on that one. Our knack strictly says at this point 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A. It does not say and other classifications as chosen to be added. It does not say 6A. So yes, a 6A, that's kind of, as many of you will recall, we had different divisions within the 5A for football. This past year, we will this next year. It didn't create a 6A, it didn't create a 7A, though some people could probably argue, hey, that's a different classification. It wasn't. It was all within the 5A because we couldn't create a 6A or 7A without changing the knack. So those are some things to consider, definitely. Yeah. Other comments? Go to the order. Item number 11, public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to a committee member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. From any of our locales all around the state of Nevada, do we have any public comment in person at this time? Hearing none. I have none in my email either. So we will close item number 11. Item number 12 is adjournment. Thank you, everybody, for all the time you have spent, the effort you have spent with us today. We appreciate it. And at 3:24 p.m. on April 16th, this meeting of the Realignment Committee is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.